Now we can head to the press review, and for this, Antonia Kerrigan joins me on set. Hi, Antonia. So you're starting us off in the UK, where steel is in the public eye.
That's quite right. Let's begin with this story of British Steel. Now, the government took this, the final virgin steel manufacturing furnace in the UK into public control 15 months ago. And as of yesterday, it's been nationalised, taken out of the hands of the Chinese group Jingye. Now, this was in the interest, in a bid to salvage the country's waning industrial sovereignty and the 4,000 jobs that went with this steel plant. However, you can imagine the Chinese are not best pleased. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has said, this is in Global Times, the Chinese Communist Party affiliated paper, the Ministry of Commerce condemns the UK nationalisation. They say the country has disregarded Jingye Group's contributions to the UK economy, undermining the company's legitimate rights. And they say this factory was a loss maker for years before the Jingye company acquired it, and that they injected substantial funds into its running. Well, let's have a look back to the UK press 15 months ago when the UK government stepped in. That's not quite the way the UK will remember things. British Steel tries to reverse what they call the sabotage of the Scunthorpe furnace. This says, and the UK government say, they stepped in because there were fears the company were intentionally running this plant into the ground in order to increase UK dependence on Chinese imports. At the time, they cited the fact the company had apparently stopped ordering raw materials and selling off the materials they had. So very different versions of this from the UK and Chinese coverage.
I see, Antonia. Now, in your notes for me here, you're saying that the heatwave, the latest heatwave in France, is coming to an end. I really hope you're right, but apparently it's not the end of all of our issues.
That's quite right. The danger has not passed for the water supply. Let's have a look at the front page of La Croix. This is the River Loire, and as you see, it's a desolate desert, you might say, and the headline is "We will need to share the water." On the inside pages, you have a bit of a situation explanation on the water supply. After a rainy winter, there was 30% less rainfall than usual in May, and then 3 early, intense heat waves close together have left ground moisture levels extremely low in France, and a quarter of small waterways, are now running dry. That's more than has ever been the case since those specific records began in 2012. 100 departments in France are already under water use restrictions. And I should also say 100,000 residents, that's not enormous, but 100,000 residents are living off either deliveries from water cistern lorries or depending on water bottle distributions. So that's really quite frightening. And this, as yesterday, or on Monday, the French Parliament will vote on an emergency bill for agriculture, and it's creating already a lot of controversy as the bill was finalised yesterday. This open letter in Le Monde says this bill runs the risk of creating a logic of every man for himself when it comes to the management of water. This, as the bill plans to double France's capacity for water storage. That's these famous mega basins where water is collected over the winter in these sort of swimming pool structures to be used for irrigation in the summer. This open letter says that allows the unsustainable agro-industrial model to continue and delays actual adaptation. I'd also like to show you this quite poignant testimony from a French farmer, a French organic farmer, saying, "I thought I would have time to prepare after late frost, a cold spring, sudden heat in May, 3 heat waves in 6 weeks." This is the state of his plants. He's in a state of real despair. He said he wanted to farm responsibly so he could tell his son one day that he'd done his bit for the planet. But those who try to respond and adapt to climate chaos still aren't spared its consequences, this article says.
And going from one case of dehydration of soil to a far worse case over in Central Asia.
Yes, let's look at the Aral Sea. This is covered in El País, where this is the world's 4th largest lake, or was in the 1960s. As you can see, this is what it looks like now. It lies between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, and it was as I say, the world's fourth largest lake until the diversion of nearby waterways for irrigation, for farmland, left this in its wake. Only 10% of the lake remains, but the lake bed is a rich site of carbon storage, as you can imagine. Once it's dried up, though, and oxygen reacts with all of that organic matter, the carbon matter breaks down and you get a huge amount of CO2 emissions. So there is a team of Spanish scientists with the ambition of refilling this lake at least to 50% of its original capacity. They reckon that could prevent the release of about 600 million tonnes more CO2 still being sequestered in this former lake bed. They say they'd like to finance the project through carbon credits, which is a controversial financial mechanism, but in this instance they see it as a means to an end to restore what is often described as the world's worst example of desertification.
Finally, we've got something a bit lighter, Antonia, because we can talk about beavers and a beaver who's in love. Is that correct?
Well, that's what we're told by The Times. This is Steve McQueen, and he got his name because in his former home in Northumbria, he made several escape attempts. So that's in homage to his escaping nature and, of course, the actor in The Great Escape. The keepers at his former home in Northumbria believed or attribute his escape attempts to a search for romantic love. I don't quite know how we verify that, but here are the two children he had earlier this year with the love of his life, Doris, who he met on a so-called blind date.
Wonderful. That's a great way to end. Thank you very much for the press review, Antonia. We'll be back shortly for more news.